Muscle cars were born to roar. Loud engines, rear-wheel burnouts, raw power, and bold designs. They represent freedom, rebellion, and pure American horsepower. But not every car that wore the muscle badge earned its stripes. Some were poorly timed, others were poorly built, and a few were downright embarrassing. Whether neutered by emissions regulations, betrayed by boring styling, or slapped together with cheap parts and big promises, these are machines that left gearheads shaking their heads. Today, we're counting down the 10 most hated muscle cars ever made. The ones that tried to flex but flopped, that wore the name but lacked the soul. Buckle up, or maybe don't, because some of these cars barely move in first place. Number 10. The late 70s and early 80s were dark times for muscle cars, and the 1980 Pontiac Trans AM Turbo is a prime example of that decline. Faced with tightening emission standards and rising fuel prices, Pontiac ditched its powerful 6.6L V8 for a 4.9L turbocharged V8 that promised performance but failed to deliver. On paper, it seemed like a modern solution, forced induction for more power and efficiency, but the execution was awful. The engine barely made 210 horsepower, suffered from severe turbo lag, and often ran hot. Reliability was another nightmare, with many owners reporting overheating and blown turbos. Despite being immortalized in pop culture, especially through Smokey and the Bandit, the 1980 Trans AM Turbo was all bark and no bite. It had aggressive looks, a shaker hood, and flashy decals, but when it came to performance, it couldn't outrun its reputation for disappointment. Number 9. When Ford rolled out the Mustang II in 1974, it tried to align with the fuel-conscious times by shrinking the pony car. Unfortunately, that also meant gutting its muscle car soul. The 1978 King Cobra edition, with its giant snake decals, flashy stripes, and flared fenders, attempted to bring back performance flavor, but was all just dressing on a weak package. Under the hood, the 5.0L 302ci V8 made only 139 horsepower, and that was the most you could get. The rest of the components were equally uninspiring. A soft suspension, clumsy steering, and sluggish acceleration made it feel more like a poseur than Predator. It was heavy, underpowered, and built on the Pinto platform, which didn't exactly scream performance. The King Cobra is a textbook example of how automakers in the 70s tried to sell performance with graphics instead of substance, and muscle car fans hated it for that. Number 8. The Dodge Aspen R/T was Dodge's attempt to keep muscle alive in the face of the performance crash of the mid-1970s. On the surface, it looked the part. Racing stripes, hood scoops, and R/T badging made it seem like a worthy heir to Mopar legends. But the reality was a huge letdown. The most powerful version came with a 360 cubic inch V8, making just 170 horsepower, far less than its predecessors from just a few years earlier. Worse still, the Aspen R/T suffered from poor build quality, rampant rust issues, and drivetrain problems. In fact, it was part one of Chrysler's largest recalls due to subpar welding in the suspension components. Combine all that with a bland driving experience and a body that didn't age well, and you get a muscle car that enthusiasts not only disliked, they actively avoided it. Even Mopar loyalists tend to skip over this black mark in Dodge's performance history. Number 7. When Pontiac brought back the GTO nameplate in 2004, fans were excited until they saw it. The original GTO helped define the muscle car genre in the 1960s, so expectations were sky high. The new version, imported from Australia and built by Holden, was technically impressive. It had a 5.7L LS1 V8 engine, making 350 horsepower, and later models even got the 400 horsepower LS2. The performance was there, it was fast, refined, and handled well. But the problem wasn't how it drove, it was how it looked. With smooth jelly bean styling and almost no visual aggression, the 2004 GTO looked more like a corporate fleet car than a tire-smoking monster. Many enthusiasts called it boring or generic, especially when compared to the retro-style Mustang that came out just a year later. Despite its engineering excellence, the car's complete lack of presence made it a sales disappointment and a fan-punching bag. Number 6. AMC wasn't known for muscle cars, but it tried its hand with the Matador machine, and the results were forgettable at best. The machine name had previously been used on the Rebel machine, which was a legitimate performance car. But by the time AMC slapped the badge on the Matador, all the edge was gone. The car was huge and heavy, and while it was available with a 401 Ci V8, it still felt bloated and underwhelming on the road. The styling was awkward with a long, sloping front end and a short, stubby rear that gave it a strange profile. Enthusiasts found it uninspiring, and even AMC fans barely acknowledged it. Add in AMC's notorious budget limitations, resulting in cheap interiors and questionable durability, and the Matador machine ended up as more of a curiosity than a collectible. It's rarely seen at shows, and when it is, it's usually the butt of jokes rather than the center of attention. Number 5. When the third-generation Camaro debuted in 1982, it was supposed to be a new beginning. Sleeker, lighter, and more modern than the previous version. The styling gave hope to muscle car fans. But then came the base engine, a 2.5L Iron Duke 4-cylinder. A muscle car with 4-cylinder engine is already a hard sell, but the Iron Duke made things worse with just 90 horsepower. Yes, 90. Acceleration was pitiful, and even compact cars of the era could keep up with it. It took nearly 20 seconds to hit 60 miles per hour. Even the V6 options weren't much better. And it wasn't until the Z28 and IROC Z trims arrived later that the Camaro regained its muscle car identity. The Iron Duke variant remains a black eye in Camaro history. A car that looked fast but moved like it was pulling a trailer uphill. Today, it's remembered as the worst way to spec a Camaro, and it represents everything wrong with early 80s performance. Number 4. The original Roadrunner was a no-frills performance machine that offered big power for cheap, a working-class muscle car legend. But by 1976, the Roadrunner had devolved into a badge slapped onto Plymouth Roadrunner, a compact economy car with flashy trim. While it looked sporty on the outside with its stripes and spoilers, the best engine you could get was a 360 Ci V8, making just 160 horsepower. That might have been okay if the car had been lightweight or fun to drive, but it wasn't. The Volare Roadrunner had a soft, wallowy suspension, vague steering, and poor build quality. It was also part of the infamous era of Chrysler unreliability, plagued by recalls and rust issues. Essentially, it was a Roadrunner in name only, a dressed-up commuter car pretending to be something it wasn't. Hardcore Mopar fans still cringe when they see one, and is widely regarded as one of the biggest letdowns in muscle car history. Number 3. The Mach 1 badge conjures images of roaring V8S, shaker hoods, and drag strip dominance. But by 1971, Ford started bloating the Mustang in both size and style. The new body was longer and wider to meet crash standards and accommodate bigger engines, but it also made the car heavier and more sluggish. While high-performance versions were still available, the base model Mach 1 came with a 302 Ci V8, making just 210 horsepower, not nearly enough to move its increased bulk with authority. Performance was soft, handling was sloppy, and the extra weight dulled the driving experience. Worse yet, the styling was polarizing, with its oversized grille and fastback lines turning off some traditional Mustang fans. Many felt the car had lost its way, becoming a caricature of its former self. It wasn't terrible by general standards, but as a Mach 1, it simply didn't live up to badge, and that made it one of the most hated iterations. Number 2. The Chevelle had been a muscle car icon to the late 60s and early 70s, but by 1975, it had become a victim of the era's performance decline. The Laguna S3 was introduced as a sporty version with NASCAR-inspired looks. Sloped nose, body-color urethane bumpers, and sporty trim. But beneath the styling, it was a dud. The best engine available was a 454 V8, but it was choked down under 240 horsepower thanks to emissions equipment and poor tuning. The suspension was tuned more for comfort than performance, and the car handled like a yacht. The interior was a mix of dated plastics and fake wood, and the build quality was hit or miss. It was a far cry from the fire-breathing Chevelles of just a few years earlier. Collectors still don't show much love for the Laguna S3, seeing it as the moment when the Chevelle nameplate lost its bite and became irrelevant. Number 1. Chevrolet gave the Monte Carlo SS one last hurrah in 2006 with the return of a V8 engine, but it was far from the muscle car comeback fans hoped for. The 5.3L V8 made 303 horsepower, which sounded promising, but then you realize it was mounted in a front-wheel drive layout. That meant torque steer, understeer, and a driving experience that felt more like a minivan than a muscle car. The Monte Carlo had already been softened over the years, but this version tried to blend NASCAR-inspired aesthetics with front-drive commuter dynamics, a confusing and unsatisfying mix. It was heavy, awkwardly styled, and felt more like a styling exercise than a serious performance machine. The Monte Carlo SS ended its run with a whimper, mocked by enthusiasts who saw it as everything a muscle car shouldn't be. It's often held up as the worst example of how the SS badge has been misused in GM's modern era.